In an age when kings and priests held absolute control over knowledge, nature was seen as the stage of the gods. Rain was the tears of Zeus, rivers were the breath of Poseidon, and storms were thought to be the wrath of sea spirits. There was no place for logical explanation until a man from Miletus began to think differently. His name was Thales. For Thales, everything in the world must have a foundation that humans could understand. He looked at the river flowing beneath the docks of Miletus, watching how water changed its form, turning into vapor, rain, and ice. Perhaps, he thought, everything comes from water, not from magic, not from gods, but from the simplest elements surrounding human life. When Thales presented this idea before nobles and priests, they laughed at him. "How can water explain the heavens and the stars?" said one priest mockingly. But Thales was unshaken. He replied, "Because without water there is no life, and from life all things begin." Those words shook the intellectual foundations of the ancient world, a theory that seemed simple, yet bold enough to challenge an entire mythological order. From that point on, philosophy was born. For most Greeks, a river was just a source of water, but for Thales it was his first teacher. He often stood by the winding meander river near Miletus, observing how water eroded rock, carved valleys, nourished fields, and flowed into the sea. To him, water was not merely a substance, but a force that shaped the order of the world. Thales began to think that change itself was the essence of existence. Water could become mist, rain, or ice, always changing yet remaining the same in nature. From this came a great idea. The world was a single unity in constant motion, not a chaotic creation ruled by angry gods. In his private notes, he wrote that, "Water is the first principle of all things." This thought astonished many nobles. To them, the world existed by divine decree. But for Thales, water was the true God, not because it should be worshipped, but because it explained everything without myth. He found a universal truth in something every person touched daily. News of the strange philosopher from Miletus reached the ears of the king of Lydia. In a grand palace gilded with gold, Thales was summoned to explain his theory. The royal advisors waited with mocking smiles. How could water explain fire, metal, and the heavens? But Thales remained calm. He asked for a cup of water. "From this water," he said, "comes vapor that rises to the sky, becomes clouds, and returns as rain to give life to the earth. From the moist soil grows trees, and from wood comes fire. Tell me then, what does not come from water?" The nobles fell silent, though the king chuckled. "You would challenge the gods with water, Thales?" Thales bowed slightly and answered, "I do not challenge the gods. I only learn from what they have created." His words silenced the hall. For the first time, philosophy spoke before the throne, not with a sword, but with reason. After his meeting with the king, Thales' name spread far and wide. The priests in the temples began to call his teachings dangerous. They accused him of disrespecting the gods by explaining nature without sacred rituals. But Thales never saw himself as an enemy of religion. He simply believed that understanding the world was the highest form of honoring the Creator. He taught his students by the sea, drawing the patterns of waves and measuring the tides. "The gods gave us reason to read the world," he said, "not just to worship it." Those words awakened many. They began to see that knowledge was not rebellion, but liberation. Philosophy was born from such courage. When someone dared to ask, why? In a world where questions were forbidden, Thales believed that the secret of the universe was hidden in the simplest thing, a drop of water. On every journey, he carried a small jar filled with water from a different river. From the Nile in Egypt to the Meander in Ionia, he noticed that every water, though seemingly the same, had its own character, its taste, color, and flow. Water, he told his students, not only gives life, it teaches us the unity behind all diversity. To Thales, water symbolized existence itself. It could change form, evaporate into vapor, freeze into ice, flow into rivers, yet its essence never changed. That made him believe the world was not created by many gods but derived from one eternal principle. This theory challenged the ancient traditions that saw nature as a battlefield of deities. One night he wrote on a worn papyrus, "If all begins from water, then all life is kin." The sentence was simple, yet it shook the foundation of ancient belief. In a single drop of water, Thales found the seed of both science and spirituality. At the quiet harbor of Miletus, night slowly descended. Sailors rested, but Thales stayed awake. He stood at the pier, gazing at the starlit sky. In the faint glow of the moon, he realized something extraordinary. The movement of the stars mirrored the currents of the sea below. The world above and the world below spoke the same language: order. Thales began recording the positions of the stars each night. He discovered that certain stars appeared in the same place every year, marking the arrival of the seasons. With this discovery, Greek sailors began to navigate farther without fear of losing their way. From water and stars, navigation was born, the first true science linking earth and sky. The sea gives direction, Thales said, but the sky gives meaning. He believed that studying the stars was not to predict fate, but to read nature's design. Thus, philosophy and astronomy became one, united by the belief that the universe followed patterns that human reason could understand. Years later, Thales was summoned again by the king of Lydia, no longer as a strange philosopher, but as a respected sage. The king wanted to know the best time to attack Media. "You study the heavens," said the king. "Then tell me when the gods favor war." Thales studied the stars, calculating the paths of the moon and sun. After a long silence, he said softly, "When the sun is covered in midday, that is the time of stillness and not of battle." The king laughed but noted his words. Months later, in the midst of battle, the sun suddenly darkened, a solar eclipse. The soldiers panicked, priests cried that the gods were angry, and the fighting stopped. The story spread across kingdoms. People began to believe that Thales' knowledge surpassed magic and prophecy. He did not beg the gods for signs. He measured the heavens with reason. From that day on, even kings stopped laughing at logic. After the eclipse, Thales' fame transcended borders. Rulers from Lydia, Persia, and even Egypt invited him as an advisor. But he was not a war strategist. He spoke of balance, of harmony between power and wisdom. "Water," he said, "always seeks the lowest place. Thus, a true leader humbles himself to hold his people." His words astonished many kings. In a world where power was measured by might, Thales taught that gentleness was the highest form of wisdom. He turned philosophy into a guide for rulers, not to oppose power, but to humanize it. Thales knew his ideas would fade if kept only on papyrus, so he spoke, taught, and wrote freely. He wanted his ideas to flow like water, impossible to be dammed by any palace. Thales never sat on a throne, yet his influence ran deep, like an underground river. Many royal decisions were made under his counsel, from city construction to trade treaties. He walked without guards, yet nobles fell silent when he passed. Writers of his time said, "Thales was the shadow that guided kings." He ruled not with a sword, but with intellect. He knew that true power lay not with those who sat on thrones, but with those who could change how rulers thought. Yet he remained simple, eating at the marketplace with commoners, teaching by the harbor, and watching the stars from his rooftop. For Thales, knowledge was service, not a path to glory, but a way to uplift the dignity of humanity. In his old age, Thales returned to the river where his journey began. He watched the flowing water and smiled. "Everything changes," he whispered, "but the source remains the same." His students sat around him, recording his every word. To them, Thales was not just a teacher, he was the beginning of civilization itself. He proved that nature could be explained without spells, that knowledge could overcome fear. "If water is the origin," he said, "then knowledge is its current." The sun set slowly behind the hills of Miletus. The river shimmered like gold, as if affirming his words. Thales's ideas continued to flow far beyond his time, becoming the foundation of science, logic, and the belief that the world can indeed be understood by the human mind.